Montana Territory, 1879. The sun hung low over the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Dust rose in thin plumes beneath the hooves of Ryder O'Connor's stallion as he urged the beast forward. At 25, he'd already seen enough of the frontier's cruelty to last several lifetimes. "Keep moving," he muttered to himself, scanning the horizon with eyes hardened by years of solitude. The wilderness had taught him one undeniable truth: attachments were dangerous. Men who found something to love invariably found something to lose. The West took what it wanted, when it wanted, with callous indifference to human suffering. 3 years as a ranch hand, 5 as a cattle driver, and 1 miserable stint as a deputy in a mining town had shown him the same lesson. The frontier demanded everything and promised nothing in return. His parents' homestead had burned to ash when he was 17. His brother had fallen to Apache arrows near the border. His partner had bled out from a bandit's bullet last spring while they guarded a cattle shipment. No, Ryder knew better than to let anyone close again. He'd buy that parcel up north, build his cabin, and tend to his own business. A man needed nothing but his horse, his rifle, and enough sense to keep moving when trouble showed its face. The town of Silverdale appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden structures clinging to existence in the shadow of the mountains. Ryder adjusted his hat, the late afternoon sunlight catching on the silver conchos adorning the band. His lean frame carried muscle earned through years of hard work, his face weathered but still youthful beneath a light stubble. Women noticed him, but he made certain their interest remained unreciprocated. Just supplies, then back to the trail, he reminded himself as he guided his horse down the main street. The clerk at the land office had promised the paperwork would be ready by week's end. 3 more days, and he'd have his deed. 10 acres of unspoiled Montana wilderness where a man could disappear from the world's notice. Independence was survival. Solitude was safety. These weren't just beliefs. They were the hard-earned wisdom that had kept him breathing when others had fallen. The West had no patience for dreamers or romantics. It demanded pragmatism, vigilance, and above all else, emotional detachment. Ryder tethered his horse outside the general store and rolled his shoulders, easing the stiffness from his back. The journey from Helena had taken 4 days, and his body ached for rest. As he pushed through the door, the familiar scent of leather, coffee, and tobacco greeted him. "Afternoon," nodded the shopkeeper, a balding man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose. "What can I help you with?" Ryder placed his list on the counter. "Just the essentials." That's when the door opened behind him, bringing with it a gust of wind and the soft rustle of fabric. He wouldn't have turned if not for the shopkeeper's sudden smile, brightening like a lamp newly lit. "Miss Zeller, your order arrived just this morning." Curiosity, a dangerous luxury in the West, got the better of him. Ryder glanced over his shoulder and felt the ground shift beneath his boots. She couldn't have been more than 22, with honey blonde hair gathered in a practical but becoming arrangement at the nape of her neck. Her dress, a modest blue calico with white lace at the collar, spoke of simple elegance rather than frontier practicality. But it was her eyes that halted his breath, clear and blue as mountain lakes, filled with an intelligence and warmth so foreign to this harsh land that they seemed almost out of place. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels," she replied, her voice carrying the slightest hint of an Eastern accent. "My father was beginning to worry the books wouldn't arrive before winter." Ryder forced himself to look away, uncomfortable with the sudden acceleration of his pulse. She was pretty, certainly, but the frontier was full of pretty things that killed men who weren't careful. He focused instead on the items appearing on the counter as the shopkeeper filled his order. "You're new to town," she observed, and he realized with a start that she was addressing him. Ryder cleared his throat. "Just passing through." "Katherine Zeller," she offered, extending a gloved hand with such natural confidence that he found himself taking it before he could think better of the gesture. "My father is the town doctor. Ryder O'Connor." "The man buying the McAllister property?" Her eyes widened with interest. "Father mentioned someone was finally claiming that land. It's beautiful country up there, though terribly isolated." "That's the appeal, ma'am." She studied him with those unsettling blue eyes. "Most men come west seeking fortune or escape. Which is it for you, Mr. O'Connor?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. Women in frontier towns usually knew better than to pry into a stranger's business. Neither, he answered curtly. Just looking for a quiet place. No one looks for quiet with quite so much determination, she replied, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. But I won't press. Father always says a person's past is their own business unless they're bleeding from it. The shopkeeper returned with a wooden crate. Your books, Miss Zeller. Shall I have them delivered to the house? No need. I brought the wagon. She turned back to Ryder, those eyes catching his again. Perhaps we'll see each other again before you disappear into the wilderness, Mr. O'Connor. And then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and a disruption to Ryder's carefully ordered world that he couldn't immediately identify. That night, as he sat alone by his campfire on the outskirts of town, Ryder found himself pondering Katherine Zeller's words, looking for quiet with determination. The observation was too perceptive from a woman who'd spoken to him for less than 5 minutes. It unsettled him, this feeling of being seen through. The next morning, gunshots shattered the dawn stillness. Ryder was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, scanning the tree line before his conscious mind had fully awakened. Force of habit had him moving toward the sound rather than away. 3 sharp reports, followed by shouting. He found them at the bend in the road, a wagon overturned, a horse struggling in its traces, and 3 men circling Katherine Zeller and an older man who must have been her father. One bandit held the doctor at gunpoint, while another rifled through their belongings. The third approached Katherine with unmistakable intent in his posture. Ryder didn't hesitate. His first shot took the nearest bandit in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The second struck the dirt near the feet of the man threatening the doctor. Next one goes through your head, Ryder called, advancing steadily. Back away from them. The third bandit turned, raising his pistol, but Ryder was already moving. He fired again, the bullet grazing the man's arm, causing him to drop his weapon with a howl of pain. I don't miss twice, he warned, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. Take your friends and go before I reconsider my generosity. The bandits retreated, dragging their wounded companion between them. Ryder kept his rifle trained on them until they disappeared around the bend. Only then did he turn his attention to the Zellers. Dr. Zeller was helping his daughter to her feet. You have our profound thanks, young man, he said, extending his hand. He was a dignified gentleman in his 50s, with graying hair and the same startling blue eyes as his daughter, Theodore Zeller. I believe you've already met Katherine. Are you hurt? Ryder asked, his question directed more at Katherine than her father. Shaken, but unharmed, she answered, her voice steady despite the ordeal. She met his gaze directly, those blue eyes now filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, assessment, perhaps. You saved our lives, Mr. O'Connor. Anyone would have done the same, he replied uncomfortably. I rather think not, Dr. Zeller countered. Most men would have kept riding, particularly a stranger with no stake in local affairs. You must join us for dinner tonight, I insist. Ryder wanted to refuse. The idea of sitting at a family table, making polite conversation, engaging in the very kind of human connection he'd been avoiding for years. It went against every instinct he'd honed for survival. But Katherine was looking at him with those eyes that seemed to see through his carefully constructed walls, and he found himself nodding in agreement. 7 o'clock, Dr. Zeller said, clapping him on the shoulder. And don't worry about dressing formally. We maintain civilization's comforts where we can, but we're practical frontier folk at heart. As he helped them right their wagon and calm the frightened horse, Ryder felt the first crack in the foundation of his beliefs. He'd intervened without thought, risking his life for people he barely knew. It was precisely the kind of entanglement he'd sworn to avoid. The Zeller home sat at the edge of town, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and carefully tended garden that seemed out of place in the rugged landscape. Ryder arrived precisely at 7, hat in hand, wearing the cleanest shirt he owned. Katherine opened the door before he could knock. She wore a simple green dress that complemented her eyes, her hair arranged more elaborately than he'd seen before. Right on time, she smiled. Father appreciates punctuality. The interior of the home revealed a surprising level of Eastern refinement. Bookshelves lined the walls, a piano occupied one corner, and the dining table was set with proper china and silver. Dr. Zeller emerged from what appeared to be his study, greeting Ryder warmly. Welcome, Mr. O'Connor. I've opened a bottle of claret for the occasion. Not easy to come by in these parts, but I believe heroism warrants celebration. Dinner was unlike anything Ryder had experienced in years. Roast venison with proper gravy, fresh biscuits, vegetables from their garden, and conversation that ranged far beyond the usual frontier concerns of weather and cattle prices. Dr. Zeller spoke of his practice, of bringing modern medicine to the territory. Katherine discussed the books she'd ordered, volumes of poetry and natural philosophy that revealed an educated mind. "What brought you to Montana, Mr. O'Connor?" Dr. Zeller asked as they finished their meal. "You strike me as a man who could succeed anywhere." Ryder hesitated and used to sharing personal details. "I grew up in Missouri. Came west after the war." "And your family?" Katherine asked. "Gone." The word hung in the air, heavier than he'd intended. The war, and then frontier troubles. Something in Katherine's expression shifted, a flash of empathy rather than pity. "We lost my mother to influenza 5 years ago. That's when Father decided we should come west, where doctors are scarce and life has clarity. Katherine has been my right hand," Dr. Zeller added with obvious pride. "She assists with my practice, keeps records, even helps with procedures when necessary. She's developed quite a reputation for calming frightened children." "Father exaggerates," she demurred, but Ryder could see the competence in her steady hands, the intelligence behind those compelling eyes. "Have you medical training?" he asked. "Informal, but extensive. Father believes women are as capable of rational thought and scientific understanding as men, a radical notion in some circles." Her smile held a hint of challenge. "And you, Mr. O'Connor? What occupies your thoughts besides solitude?" The question caught him off guard. What did occupy his thoughts? Survival, mostly. The next meal, the next shelter, the next potential threat. The realization troubled him more than he expected. "I read, when I can find books," he admitted. "History, mostly." Katherine's eyes brightened. "We have quite a library. You're welcome to borrow volumes while you're in town." Before Ryder could respond, a pounding at the door interrupted them. Dr. Zeller rose, frowning at the intrusion. "Doctor," came an urgent call. "There's been an accident at the mine." The evening ended abruptly as Dr. Zeller gathered his medical bag. Katherine efficiently packed bandages and medicines into a second satchel. "I apologize for cutting our dinner short," the doctor said, "but duty calls." "I'll accompany you," Ryder offered, surprising himself as much as them. "Mines can be unstable after accidents." Katherine gave him a grateful look. "We accept, thank you." The mining accident kept them occupied until dawn. A collapsed tunnel had trapped 3 men and injured 5 others. Dr. Zeller worked tirelessly, with Katherine assisting as competently as any trained nurse. Ryder found himself helping with the rescue efforts, his strength and calm demeanor proving valuable in the crisis. As the sun rose, the last injured miner was stabilized. Exhausted, covered in dust and others' blood, the 3 of them rode back to town in weary silence. "You were remarkable in there," Katherine said finally, her voice soft with fatigue. "The way you shored up that beam, allowing them to extract Johnson, not many men would have taken such a risk for strangers." Ryder felt uncomfortable with the praise. "It needed doing." "Yes," she agreed, studying him. "But you didn't hesitate. For someone so determined to avoid human connections, you have a curious habit of putting yourself in danger for others." The observation struck too close to the contradiction he'd been avoiding. He changed the subject. "You were impressive yourself. Most women would faint at the sight of such injuries." "Most women haven't had my opportunities," she replied. "Father never limited my education based on conventional notions of femininity. He believes useful knowledge has no gender." Over the next week, Ryder found reasons to remain in town. The land office had discrepancies in the paperwork, he told himself. His horse needed rest. Supplies required careful consideration. In reality, he found himself drawn to the Zeller household with increasing frequency. Dr. Zeller engaged him in discussions of history and philosophy that awakened intellectual hunger he'd long suppressed. Katherine challenged his thinking with perspectives he'd never considered, her mind as compelling as her appearance. More troubling were the moments when their hands accidentally touched while reaching for the same book, or when he caught her watching him with those perceptive blue eyes that seemed to see past his carefully constructed barriers. One afternoon, while Dr. Zeller attended a difficult birth, Katherine invited Ryder to help organize the new medical texts that had arrived. These need alphabetizing by author, she explained, gesturing to a stack of leather-bound volumes. I'm cataloging them in this ledger. They worked companionably for a time, the silence comfortable rather than strained. Ryder found himself stealing glances at her as she concentrated on her task, a small furrow appearing between her brows when she encountered difficult medical terminology. May I ask you something personal? Katherine said suddenly, setting down her pen. Ryder tensed but nodded. What happened that made you decide human connections weren't worth the risk? He nearly denied the premise of her question, but those eyes demanded honesty. Everyone I've ever cared about is dead, he said flatly. Parents, brother, friends. The frontier doesn't tolerate weakness, and caring about people makes you vulnerable. Katherine considered this. My mother's death nearly destroyed my father, she said finally. For months, he barely spoke, barely ate. I feared I would lose him too. She traced the edge of her ledger with one finger. But one morning, he came to breakfast and said something I'll never forget. Katherine, grief is the price we pay for love, and it is always, always worth the cost. Ryder looked away, uncomfortable with the emotion her words stirred. Your father hasn't lost everyone. No, she acknowledged. But his point remains valid. Isolation may protect you from loss, but it also denies you everything that makes survival meaningful. Before he could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching rapidly. Katherine rose, moving to the window. Riders, she said, her voice suddenly tense. 4 of them. Ryder joined her, his hand instinctively moving to his holstered revolver. He recognized the men immediately, the bandits from the road, plus a 4th man who carried himself with the dangerous confidence of someone accustomed to violence. Stay inside, he ordered, moving toward the door. Lock it behind me. Ryder, no. Katherine. He cut her off, using her first name without thinking. They're here for revenge. I won't risk your safety. This is precisely what I meant, she said, frustration evident in her voice. You'd face 4 armed men alone rather than acknowledge you might need help. The pounding at the door interrupted their argument. Ryder positioned himself between Katherine and the entrance, drawing his revolver. O'Connor, called a rough voice. We know you're in there. Come out and face me like a man, or we burn the house down with you in it. Who is that? Katherine whispered. The one with the scar. Burke Jenkins, Ryder replied grimly. Outlaw with a reputation for holding grudges. I had a run-in with his brother in Colorado 2 years ago. Seems he's been looking for me. Understanding dawned in Katherine's eyes. That's why you want isolation. You're running from enemies. Among other reasons, he acknowledged. Now stay back. Ryder opened the door, stepping onto the porch with his revolver held loosely at his side. The 4 men faced him, spread out across the yard, each with a hand hovering near their weapons. Jenkins, Ryder nodded calmly. Didn't expect to see you this far north. The scarred man spat tobacco juice onto the dirt. Been tracking you for months, O'Connor. You killed my brother. Your brother tried to rob a stagecoach I was guarding, Ryder corrected. I gave him the chance to surrender. And now I'm giving you a chance, Jenkins sneered. Step away from the house. This is between you and me. Ryder took a step forward, keeping his body between the bandits and the doorway where he knew Katherine still stood. Your quarrel's with me, not the doctor or his daughter. We handle this elsewhere. Too late for that. Jenkins grinned nastily. Way I see it, you care about these folks. That means they're part of this now. First I kill you, then I have some fun with the pretty blonde. Ryder's blood ran cold. Behind him, he heard Katherine's sharp intake of breath. Last chance to walk away, Jenkins, Ryder warned, his voice deadly quiet. Jenkins laughed, the sound ugly in the afternoon stillness. 4 against 1, O'Connor. Those ain't odds I'd take. 3 against 2, came Katherine's voice as she stepped onto the porch, her father's shotgun held competently in her hands. And I assure you, Mr. Jenkins, I know how to use this. Ryder wanted to shout at her to get back inside, but there was no time. Jenkins went for his gun. The next moments passed in a blur of gunfire and smoke. Ryder's first shot caught Jenkins in the chest. He dove for cover as the other bandits opened fire, splintering the porch railing. Katherine discharged one barrel of the shotgun, the blast throwing one attacker backward. Ryder rolled, coming up firing. A second bandit fell. The third turned to run, but collapsed as Ryder's bullet found its mark. When the smoke cleared, Jenkins lay dying in the dirt, blood bubbling from his lips as he struggled for breath. Ryder approached cautiously, kicking the man's gun away. "You should have stayed in Colorado," Ryder said, no satisfaction in his voice. Jenkins coughed, blood staining his beard. "You think this ends it? My cousins, they'll come for you. Everyone you care about." "You won't live to see it," Ryder replied coldly. He turned to find Katherine examining one of the wounded men, checking his pulse with clinical detachment despite the danger he'd posed moments before. "This one's alive," she reported. "We should get him to father." Ryder stared at her in disbelief. "He just tried to kill us." "Yes," she agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "And now he's a wounded man in need of medical attention. That's what we do, Ryder. We help people, even when they don't deserve it. Especially then." In that moment, with Gunsmoke still hanging in the air and his heart pounding from the confrontation, Ryder felt something fundamental shift within him. Katherine Zeller, with her compassion alongside her courage, her principles alongside her practicality, challenged everything he thought he knew about survival on the frontier. The town sheriff arrived soon after, drawn by the gunfire. The wounded bandit was taken to Dr. Zeller's clinic under guard. The others were carried to the undertaker. That evening, after giving their statements and cleaning up the damage to the house, Ryder and Katherine sat on the repaired porch steps, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Jenkins was right about one thing," Ryder said finally. "His family won't let this go. As long as I'm here, you and your father are in danger." Katherine turned to face him, her expression serious. "Is that why you've avoided connections? Fear that your past would endanger anyone close to you?" "Partially," he admitted. "The rest is simply experience. Everyone I've ever cared about has been taken from me. After a while, you stop giving fate new targets. That's a lonely way to live. It's survival." "Is it?" she challenged. "Or is it merely existing? There's a difference, Ryder." He had no answer for that. The next morning, Ryder collected his deed from the land office. 10 acres of wilderness, just as promised, a perfect place to disappear. He spent the day in town, purchasing additional supplies, settling his accounts, preparing for departure. Dr. Zeller found him at the general store. "Katherine tells me you're leaving tomorrow." Ryder nodded. "It's time." The older man sighed. "You know, when I lost my wife, I considered abandoning my practice. What was the point of saving others when I couldn't save her? But then I realized that closing myself off from human connection wouldn't honor her memory. It would betray everything she valued. With respect, Doctor, our situations are different." "Are they?" "We've both lost people we loved. We both carry responsibilities that put us in danger. The only difference I see is that you're choosing isolation as a response, while I chose continued engagement." He clasped Ryder's shoulder. "Think carefully about what you're running from, son. Sometimes what we fear most isn't external threats, but the possibility of feeling deeply again." The doctor left him with those unsettling words, adding to the turmoil already churning inside him. Ryder spent a restless night at the hotel, his carefully constructed certainties crumbling under the weight of the past week's experiences. At dawn, he saddled his horse and loaded his supplies. The sensible course was clear: ride north to his land, build his cabin before winter set in, and return to the solitary existence that had kept him alive for years. Instead, he found himself guiding his horse toward the Zeller house. Katherine was in the garden, harvesting late vegetables for winter storage. She straightened as he approached, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. Ryder dismounted, tethering his horse to the fence. "I came to say goodbye properly." Katherine removed her gardening gloves, setting them aside with deliberate care. "Is that all you came to say?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Ryder struggled to find words for the conflict raging inside him. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted finally. "Do what?" "Care about someone when I know how it ends. When I know the pain that's coming." Katherine stepped closer. "None of us know how anything ends, Ryder. That uncertainty is what makes courage possible in the first place." She reached out, her fingers lightly touching his arm. "What are you really afraid of?" The truth emerged before he could stop it. "That I'll let myself love you, and then lose you too. That I couldn't survive that pain again." The admission hung in the air between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Katherine's blue eyes widened slightly at his use of the word love, but she didn't pull away. "So you choose guaranteed loneliness over possible happiness?" she asked softly. That seems a poor bargain. It's not that simple. It never is, she agreed. But consider this. In trying to avoid pain, you're inflicting a different kind of suffering on yourself. The absence of connection is its own form of loss. She was too close now, her presence overwhelming his senses. The scent of lavender mingled with garden soil, the morning sunlight catching golden highlights in her hair. Those eyes that had captured something essential in him from their first meeting, held his gaze without wavering. I have 10 acres of wilderness waiting for me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It's isolated, difficult land. No place for a doctor's daughter, she finished, a challenging note entering her voice. You assume I couldn't adapt to such a life? I assume you shouldn't have to. That's not your decision to make alone, Katherine replied. If two people care for each other, the choice of where and how to build a life together belongs to both. Ryder felt the last of his resistance crumbling. What are you saying, Katherine? I'm saying that I've seen enough of you. Your courage, your integrity, your capacity for compassion despite your determination to deny it, to know that I'm not ready to say goodbye. She took a deep breath. I'm saying that if you rode away now, you wouldn't just be leaving Silverdale. You'd be leaving a future we might build together. The words struck him with physical force. A future together. The very concept he'd denied himself for so long, suddenly presented as a possibility by this remarkable woman. Before he could respond, shouts erupted from the direction of town. They turned to see a rider galloping toward them, waving frantically. Fire, the man called. The hotel's ablaze. Doc Zellers trapped inside with the patients he was visiting. Katherine's face drained of color. Father, she whispered. They reached town to find chaos. Flames engulfed the second story of the hotel, black smoke billowing into the morning sky. Townspeople formed a bucket brigade, but the fire was spreading rapidly. My father was checking on Mr. Peterson after his surgery, Katherine told the sheriff, her voice steady despite her fear. Second floor, east side. Can't get up there, the sheriff replied grimly. Staircase is gone. Ryder surveyed the building, noting the construction. There's a way, he said, already removing his coat. The support beams along the side would hold a man's weight. Ryder, no, Katherine grabbed his arm. It's too dangerous. He covered her hand with his own. This is who I am, Katherine. I can't stand by when help is needed. Then I'm coming with you, she declared. Father may need immediate medical attention. There was no time to argue. They circled to the east side of the building, where the fire had not yet spread fully. Ryder located the external beam structure that would provide handholds. Follow exactly where I go, he instructed. If I say drop, you drop immediately. Understand? Katherine nodded, her face set with determination. The climb was treacherous, the wood hot beneath their hands. Smoke made breathing difficult as they reached the second-floor window. Ryder broke the glass with his elbow, clearing the frame of shards before helping Katherine through. The interior was a haze of smoke and increasing heat. They found Dr. Zeller and an elderly patient huddled near the window, the doctor shielding the older man with his body. Father, Katherine cried, rushing to him. Dr. Zeller looked up, relief washing over his soot-streaked face. Katherine, Mr. O'Connor. The floor near the door collapsed. We couldn't get out. We need to move now, Ryder urged, feeling the building's increasing instability. The fire spreading quickly. Getting the elderly patient to the window and down the makeshift ladder proved challenging. Ryder went first, helping to guide the man's descent while Katherine and her father followed. They had nearly reached the ground when a thunderous crack signaled the collapse of the hotel's second floor. The impact shook their escape route. Dr. Zeller lost his grip, falling the remaining few feet, but landing safely. Katherine clung to the beam, her position precarious as the structure began to pull away from the burning building. Ryder didn't hesitate. He climbed back up, reaching for her as the beam tilted dangerously. Jump to me, he called. Katherine, you have to jump now. Their eyes met across the gap, her blue gaze filled with trust despite the danger. She leapt, her hands finding his shoulders as he caught her around the waist. The momentum carried them both backward, falling together but away from the collapsing building. They landed hard on the ground below, Ryder taking the brunt of the impact. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he barely noticed it. Katherine was in his arms, alive and whole, her heart pounding against his chest. For one suspended moment, The chaos around them faded. The fire, the shouting, the danger, all receded as Ryder looked into Katherine's eyes and saw a future he'd convinced himself was impossible. "You came back for me," she whispered. "I always will," he promised, the words emerging with absolute certainty. Dr. Zeller approached, helping them to their feet. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he embraced his daughter. "Thank you, Ryder. I believe I owe you my life twice over now." Later that evening, after the fire had been contained and the injuries treated, Ryder found Katherine sitting alone on the porch of their undamaged home. She looked up as he approached, a small smile forming on her lips. "Your shoulder?" she asked. "Just bruised," he assured her, taking a seat beside her. "Your father has a remarkable talent with bandages." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the last light faded from the sky. Finally, Ryder spoke the truth he could no longer deny. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "At least, not alone." Katherine turned to him, hope and caution warring in her expression. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you were right. I've been existing, not living. Surviving, but not building anything worth surviving for." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I have land, Katherine. Good land, with timber and water and room to build. But it's just empty space without someone to share it with." "Ryder O'Connor," she said softly, "are you asking me something specific?" He smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Not yet. That will come, properly, with your father's blessing and a ring. But I am asking if you might consider a future where Dr. Zeller's practice extends to include a new settlement north of here, where his daughter might find use for her considerable talents among people who need them, where I could wake each morning knowing that the risks of loving are worth taking." Katherine's eyes, those remarkable blue eyes that had seen through his defenses from the first moment, filled with tears that caught the lamplight from the window. "I would consider that future very carefully," she replied, her voice steady despite her emotion. "And I suspect I would find it preferable to any other I might imagine." Ryder reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with a tenderness he'd forgotten he possessed. "When I first saw you in that store, something happened that I couldn't explain. It was as if you saw parts of me I thought were long buried." "They weren't buried," Katherine said, leaning slightly into his touch. "Just waiting." 3 months later, with the first snow dusting the pines around the newly constructed cabin, Ryder stood beside Katherine before a small gathering of witnesses. Her father officiated the ceremony, his pride evident as he joined their hands together. "Do you, Ryder James O'Connor, take Katherine Elizabeth Zeller to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" Ryder looked into the blue eyes that had first captured his soul in a dusty general store. "I do," he vowed, the words carrying all the certainty his heart now held. "And do you, Katherine Elizabeth Zeller, take Ryder James O'Connor to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do," she answered, her voice clear and sure. "Then by the authority vested in me, and before these witnesses, I pronounce you husband and wife." Dr. Zeller smiled broadly. "You may kiss your bride, son." As Ryder drew Katherine into their first kiss as husband and wife, cheers erupted from the small crowd gathered in their new home. The cabin around them, built with Ryder's hands, but designed with Katherine's practical insight, represented everything he'd once believed impossible, a place of both shelter and connection, safety and vulnerability, solitude and community. That night, as the celebration wound down and their guests departed for town, Ryder stood with Katherine on the porch of their home. Snow fell gently around them, transforming the wilderness into a landscape of quiet beauty. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. Katherine leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "More than I believed possible," she answered. "And you? Any regrets about abandoning your solitary plans?" Ryder looked out at the land that was now theirs, not just property, but the foundation for a life together. In the distance, the outline of the medical clinic they were building was visible, a place where Dr. Zeller could train his daughter in the skills she would need to eventually continue his work. "The only regret I have," he said, turning to face his wife, is that I spent so many years convinced that love was a liability rather than the greatest strength a person could possess. Katherine smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. We can't change the path that brought us here, she said, but we can choose the one that carries us forward. As snow continued to fall around them, Ryder O'Connor held his wife close, knowing with absolute certainty that the moment her eyes had captured his soul in that general store, she had indeed become his forever love, and he would spend the rest of his life grateful for the courage she had given him to believe in beginnings rather than endings.